is one very rare and extraordinary human being who thought of contemporary issues completely differently compared to the people around him at the time. We can say Tagore is far ahead of his times, far ahead of his times. Let us look at his notion of freedom. During the colonial rule, when the British were ruling Indians, it is usually understood that the British were free and Indians unfree. And Indians should get freedom. And the British were powerful and rich, and Indians should be like them. They too should be like them. But Tagore thought differently. To Tagore, the British were powerful and rich. That's true. But it doesn't mean that they were free. The British were unfree in certain way, and Indians were unfree in some other way. And Indians should not be like the British. Indians should learn from the British, but there is something that India also has to give to the British. It is called the West, the East. Tagore felt East has to give something to the West. And East also has to learn something from the West. And West and East together should be free. It is not that the West is already free. So, what is this freedom that Tagore was talking about? And that freedom would be not only for an individual, but for the society also. That is the freedom for a country. That is Swaraj. Tagore was not saying that for an individual, freedom is something, and for a society or for a nation, it was different. No. Okay. This is a quotation attributed to Tagore. In this book, The White Umbrella by Brown D. Mackenzie, 1953. White Umbrella, Indian Political Thought from Mohan to Gandhi. Tagore said, this is attributed to Tagore, we must never forget in the present day that those people who have got their political freedom are not necessarily free. Political freedom is not complete freedom. They are merely powerful. To Tagore, freedom is kind of awakening, isolation of self, freedom from isolation of self, freedom from parochial bonds. Freedom is not power. Maybe more comprehensively, one can see Tagore's notion of freedom in this most famous poem from Gitanjali. Mind is without fear. Okay. World not broken into the fragments by narrow domestic walls. Clear stream of reason has not lost its way. Okay. To that heaven of freedom, my father, let my country awake. Finally. So, to Tagore, freedom is happiness, liberation, sense of unity. It's not simply political freedom. Okay. And he wanted India to be like this. Let my country awake. This is not for an individual. This is for India. Okay. Then, with such a view of freedom, how did he look at India's freedom struggle? And we are going to discuss how Tagore looked at particularly Gandhi and his leadership. Did Tagore appreciate Gandhi's ideology? Did he think that Gandhi was fighting for Swaraj that Tagore wanted? And it appears Tagore fully approved Gandhi and his ideology. It was Tagore who called Gandhi Mahatma. Okay, person who got Nobel Prize in Poetry, which Tagore got in 1913, surely didn't use the word Mahatma casually. Tagore meant it. Tagore was very much impressed by Gandhi. If there are differences between Gandhi and Tagore, those differences are much minor compared to the convergence they had on many issues. Let us discuss certain basic ideas of Gandhism. The idea of non-violence. Tagore approved. The idea of suffering. To change others. Okay. And and through this method contribute a different India. Okay. And Tagore thought that this thing, Gandhian method, is also India's method, not Gandhi is alone. So Tagore thought what Gandhi was doing was his contribution to the West. Okay. He liked Gandhi as a person and as an activist, and he approved of the ideology. The extent to which Tagore approved was really striking. Okay. Let us look at where these two people first met. Most of the quotations, almost all the quotations are taken from this book, Tagore and Gandhi by Rudrangshu Mukherjee. Okay. The basic details are this. Tagore born in 1861. His grandfather Dwarkanath was a wealthy landlord, also a close friend of Raja Ram Mohan Roy. So Tagore was born in a very elite family, exposed to the Western education. He traveled to England in 1879 when he was 18 years. And in India, he took part in Swadeshi movement, but he retired from active politics around 1907 and 8. Okay. And Gandhi was 8 years younger to Tagore. They first met in 1915. Gandhi just returned from South Africa. So Tagore was world famous. By then he got Nobel Prize. And Gandhi was equally famous for his struggle in South Africa. Okay. And Tagore was in touch with Gandhi's activities in South Africa. And there was one person who was like an intermediary between these two, C.F. Andrews. He was very close to Gandhi. He used to call Gandhi Mohan. Andrews was the only person who would call Gandhi like that. Okay. So Tagore was closely following Gandhi. And what he said, okay, before we go to Gandhi's meeting with Gandhi, let us see what Tagore's position was. Tagore didn't like Swadeshi. Why? Because he didn't like using coercive methods during Swadeshi, like stopping essential services, like barber and washerman, beating up people on roads, burning houses. He said, we couldn't bear the delay involved in gradually winning the consent of the people. The use of threat to stop dissent cannot be called a nationalistic unification. So Tagore was not for force, not for disciplining people. in the name of nation. So basically, he was disillusioned with Swadeshi. And next, he went for village work. Then here also, he got a different kind of disillusionment. He did certain things in the villages of his estate. He began the project of village reconstruction in his estates, helped set up free health centers, primary schools, night schools for adults, and a rural bank. But he was disillusioned with the caste system hindering his work. He said, having seen all this, I no longer feel any desire to idealize the Hindu Samaj through delusions pleasant to the ear, but ultimately suicide. Okay. What kind of ideas he had? One observation you can make, we can make about what he thought of property can be learned from his letter to his son. To his son abroad who went to study agriculture. Tagore felt that agriculture was useful to India. He said, remember that the landlord's wealth is actually the peasant. They are bearing the cost of your education by starving or half starving themselves. It is your responsibility to pay this debt in full. That is the first task, even before the welfare of your own family. This is not Tagore's public speech. This is a letter to his own son. This shows that whatever Marx had to say was very much within Tagore, but as a part of maybe his compassion and sensitivity. So Tagore is in that sense radical. This is a radical statement on wealth. And he was disillusioned with the caste system, village work. He was disillusioned with Swadeshi. Okay. Then came Gandhi. And this is what he said about Gandhi. Mahatma Gandhi came and stood at the cottage door of the destitute millions, clad as one of themselves and talking to them in their own language. Tagore was struck by Gandhi's simplicity, the way he could connect to the people. You stood among us to proclaim your faith in the ideal, which you know to be that of India. Gandhi's ideals of truth and non-violence are not Gandhi's innovation, according to Tagore. They are the ideals of India. The ideal which is both against the cowardliness of hidden revenge and the coward submissiveness of the terror-stricken. Submissiveness with fear. No. Revenge. No. Okay. So Gandhi was not for this. And then he says, this is what is important. Okay, closely on, what is it that Tagore believes in? Tagore believes that there is something called power of spirit, which is more than material or political power. Material and political power. And this power of spirit is what India should teach to the British. Okay. And that contributes to freedom of both the British and the Indians. So Tagore was looking at things more philosophically and spiritually and linking it to politics. See, now let us look at the power of good must prove its truth and strength by its fearlessness, by its refusal to accept any imposition. India must willingly accept her penance of suffering, the suffering which is the crown of the great. Armed with her utter faith in goodness, she must stand unabashed before the arrogance that scoffs at the power of the spirit. Will India succeed? Tagore says. Those who believe in spiritual life know that to stand against wrong, which has overwhelming material power behind it, is victory itself. It is the victory of the active faith in the ideal. Active faith in the ideal, in the teeth of evident defeat. So, Gandhi to Tagore was demonstrating the power of spirit. And Tagore shared that there could be a violence in a satyagraha like this. Okay. This is the conversation between Tagore and Gandhi before Gandhi launched his nationwide agitation against Rowlatt Act. On April 5th, 1919, Gandhi addressing Gurudev, he said, I will not be happy until I have received your considered opinion on the endeavor to purify the political country. Gandhi was asking for Tagore's opinion. And Tagore's reply dated April 12th, addressing for the first time in a letter, Dear Mahatma Ji, passive resistance is a force which is not necessarily moral in itself. It can be used against truth as well as for it. The danger inherent in all force grows stronger when it is likely to gain success, for then it becomes a temptation. Tagore was not blindly supporting Gandhi. Tagore was in a position to discuss, analyze, come into the risks in it, risks on using. He was saying that passive resistance, which is also called satyagraha, in itself is not moral. It can be used for good or against good. Okay. He's qualifying that satyagraha is not always moral. And then if you are successful, you can be tempted to be misusing it. So Tagore is qualifying when satyagraha is moral or not. And then Tagore is concerned about what it will do on Gandhi's desire to fight evil with good. Tagore is saying, such a fight is for heroes and not for men led by impulses of the moment. Fighting using satyagraha against the evil is for heroes. Why are heroes needed for satyagraha? Because evil on one side naturally begets evil on the other. Injustice is leading to violence and insult to vengefulness. So evil creates evil. If the British is evil, India tends to be evil. This is natural. So this should be avoided. Heroes don't respond like this. Definitely, these are the things Gandhi would love to discuss. Who would tell Gandhi at a personal level things like this? That when satyagraha can be moral and that you have to be heroic to face evil, and unless you are a hero, you are likely to be in evil yourself when you are confronted with evil. So people may think Gandhi has originated this and Tagore was just observing. It was not like that. Of course, it was Gandhi's method. But Tagore very clearly understood, appreciated, admired. Okay. And then look at how Gandhi felt. Gandhi's concern also is violence. And violence not from the British side, but from the Indian side. Gandhi wrote about the events in Ahmedabad to his private secretary. These events took place before Jallianwala Bagh event. Gandhi did not react to Jallianwala Bagh event very quickly because Gandhi wanted to know what actually happened. But he knew what happened in Ahmedabad few days before Jallianwala Bagh event. And Gandhi just didn't like what was happening because people turned violent. In the place I have made my abode, I find utter lawlessness bordering almost on Bolshevism. This interesting phrase. So that violence Gandhi calls is Bolshevism. So that statement shows what Gandhi thought of Lenin's revolution. He thought He had a very poor opinion. Calls it Bolshevism. English men and women have found it necessary to leave their bungalows and to confine themselves to a few well-guarded houses. English men and women. I overcalculated the measure of permeation of satyagraha among the people. So Gandhi was worried about the safety of English men and women. Gandhi was worried that Indians would overreact. And then I underrated the power of hatred and ill will. Among whom? Among Indians. So Gandhi's feelings and Tagore's feelings are similar. Tagore was warning and Gandhi felt the same. And finally, because of Jallianwala Bagh event, we know Gandhi's call against Rowlatt Act was turned out to be a big disaster. Gandhi called it a Himalayan blunder. So Gandhi and Tagore thought very, very alike. Tagore totally approved what Gandhi was doing. And Tagore thought that was the message of the East to the West. Okay. What Gandhi can teach to the West. If we can defy the strong, the armed, the wealthy, is all the British. Revealing to the world power of mortal spirit. The whole castle of the giant flesh will vanish in the void, and the man will find his Swaraj, man, not Indian. We, the famished, the ragged ragamuffins of the East, are to win freedom for all humanity. Gandhi is going to win freedom not for India, but for all humanity. The day was sure to come when the frail man of spirit, completely unhampered by arms, air fleets, dreadnoughts, will prove that the meek is inherit the earth. This is the phrase from Bible. So Gandhi's methods are going to prove Jesus' prophecy. The meek shall inherit the earth. He says more specifically on Gandhi, it is in the fitness of things that Mahatma Gandhi, frail in body, devoid of all material resources, should call up the immense power of the meek that has been lying waiting in the heart of the destitute and the insulted humanity of India. So Gandhi, frail in the body, no wealth, harnessing the power of the meek. So these things from Tagore show how much Tagore admired Gandhi. It is amazing. And that is part of East-West interaction to Tagore. This is what Tagore in general thought about East-West interaction. The present age has powerfully been possessed by the West. It has only become possible because to her is given some great mission for man. The West has a mission to man. We from the East have to come to her to learn whatever she has to teach us. For by doing so, we hasten the fulfillment of this age. We have to learn because that is to fulfill this age. We know that the East has her lessons to give, and she has her own responsibility of not allowing her light to be extinguished. So East has to retain its uniqueness, and the time will come when the West will find leisure to realize that she has a home of hers in the East, where her food is and her rest is. So West will come and will find in East food and rest. And for that, East should not lose itself. It should not simply get power and wealth and lose its spirit. So this is amazing conversation between two great people on what was going on at that time and what is it that they wanted to achieve through these actions.